Hello, I'm Horst Stipp. I'm with the ARF, and I'm here with Steve Sands, who is the Chief Science Officer of Sands Research. And we're here to talk about the new emerging field of neuromarketing and the application of neuro and biological research to marketing. We were both involved in the ARF Neuromarketing Collaboration Project and shared some very interesting time at what we call our Neuro Retreat in Philadelphia about a month ago, where there was a lot of discussion about this new field of applying neuro and biological methods to marketing. So we have a couple of things that we want to talk about this morning, and I thought the best thing to start off with is, as there are different people in this field using different kind of methodologies, I think it would be good to start with you telling us a little bit about exactly the kind of methodologies that you apply in this field.
Yeah, I use a combination of imaging techniques. One is the EEG and imaging the very low frequencies of the EEG. And with that, I'm able to localize in the brain where the activity is coming from. So my approach is very much a functional imaging approach, very similar to fMRI. The advantage to doing it this way is that we don't have to go into the scanner to get where the brain is responding. We have verified these responses simultaneously in the fMRI scanner. So we do spend time in the scanner, but we've come up with a technique where we can see the brain activity in real time, even in a mobile situation where people are walking around.
So what kind of device are you using for the measurement?
We use an array of electrodes that are placed on the scalp, and we have enough of those leads so that we can actually perform the imaging. Around 68 leads, which is a lot, but the accuracy, to get the accuracy so we can tell where it's coming from in the brain, we need to have that many leads.
Is your methodology different from other companies that also use EEG imaging?
Yeah, I would say so in that we're really focused on the functional imaging so that we can say, is there a difference between the left and the right frontal lobes, which has an effect on emotion and tracking. If it's auditory that we're looking at, a sound or music, we can see the activity coming from the areas of the brain involved in music perception. So it's very much akin to fMRI imaging, where we have that high localization. And we focused on these very low frequencies of the EEG, whereas most people are looking at oscillatory behaviors in the EEG, like the alpha rhythm, which is involved in eyes open, eyes closed, these sorts of things. And I'll try and keep it less technical.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say earlier that the methodology you use is mobile or can be used in different kind of places?
Right. We've come up with ways to record it while they're making purchasing decisions, walking about in the store, throughout the whole shopping experience. And this year is something we're really going to focus on. So we can look at their motivations when they actually choose a product.
So are you also using like a lab kind of situation for your research, or is it primarily, are you focusing primarily on these mobile applications?
Yeah, we're doing both. We do the lab routinely. We always have a study going on for more copy testing kinds of scenarios. For example, this year we're testing various commercials, but I do see it moving oft into the actual world and watching behavior that way.
Interesting.
It's a little more exciting. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Now, the other question that I wanted to ask you is, to the extent that you're able to share that, and maybe
sure.
It is possible to sometimes omit the name of the product or the name of the company that you work for. How long have you been in this business?
Well, I've been in this business for 4 years.
So 4 years?
And then the previous 25 years building and developing all the software and hardware for researchers that are doing, not this research, but academic research.
Okay, so here's my question then. In those 4 years, can you maybe share some of the things that you felt were really, really interesting?
Yeah.
Maybe surprising, new, and particularly I think it would be interesting to highlight to what extent you felt that those insights were really, if you want, only possible because of these new methods that you were able to employ.
Right. Well, it would still be the thing that got me involved in the research in the start, and that's the effect of a storyline on the brain activity. I wasn't involved in this type of research, but when I saw the effects of storyline, and even in a 30-second spot of commercial, they were so large, so much larger than anything I'd ever seen before in my career, that I became fascinated with it. And that's not anything that's gone away. We're able to track in very real time the effects of a good story versus a bad story. And it's very obvious when people lose the storyline or they're confused. And that's a very powerful diagnostic when you're looking at media. And you can say, well, you know, you lost them here when you put the Oompa band into the commercial. And you distracted them, and it's very obvious when that occurs. Whereas if you were doing a recall test, you probably wouldn't discover that. And so it becomes very powerful in terms of media testing.
If I may sort of connect that with some of the discussions that we had, it's often said that one of the big strengths of these methodologies is that you can really gain insights sort of on a second-by-second basis to an extent that, for example, you can't really do like in a survey method or in a focus group type method.
Right.
But when I just listened to you, I felt that you were placing more emphasis, if you want, on the whole, on the storyline, or at the connections. Is that the correct perspective?
Yeah, and that's one of the intriguing things about it, is a story doesn't have to be highly produced. It can be made up with a series of storyboards or an animatic, and that is highly predictive of the final product, the produced product. So that aspect of it is what I'm most interested in, not the final assessment of how well did this commercial or that commercial do, but rather, is this communicating the story that you want, and are you sustaining attention through it? So one can actually just take a series of storyboards and a little bit of voiceover and get a commercial and get a good sense of what's going on.
In my former life, I was with NBC. So I'm always still very interested in issues around program testing. Do you think that your methodology obviously lends itself to the analysis not just of commercials, but also of trailers and of promos for TV shows?
Right.
Have you been working in that field?
Yeah, I have. Last summer I did a really large study for a series of pilots. And unfortunately it didn't happen. And the reason it didn't happen was our results showed very clearly that they had very different responses from different audiences. In this case it was young versus old. Okay. And they were trying to capture both audiences with this one TV show, reality TV show, and the parents and the young adults were affected very differently in terms of their brain response, and it would be in the way you'd predict, with the parents being more concerned with the outcome.
So was that a test of the promos, or did you actually test?
It was actually
like
three episodes.
Wow.
Of a produced pilot, and it was decided not to go forward with it.
Because that's another interesting issue to me too. There's a science part which we're going to talk about in a second, but there's also the practicality part that you mentioned earlier. And so one question I think is, how long would people be comfortable to be tested and wear electrodes? And you're saying it kind of worked with a 40-minute show, right?
Most people forget that they have it on them when they're in there, and it's just traditional boredom. If you have to allow for them to get up and move around, and there has to be something that's going to intrigue them for that period of time. But in theory, we can run full-length movies. Going back to that pilot study, we also found that one presenter did much better than the other from the brain response, and which is much more dynamic, without asking people.
Are there any, you know, I know you've mentioned earlier you do a lot of commercial testing. Is there maybe an example from the field of commercials where you felt that your methodology produced an insight that would not have been possible with other methods?
Yes. It's very helpful to know the emotional response to something, whereas if you're trying to achieve a positive result in association, you can see it, and you can see it frame by frame. And you really don't have that resolution with post hoc questions and coming back and saying, well, when you looked at that individual, what did you think? Well, you're asking them to retrieve something they can't retrieve. They can't replay. We're not passive recorders. We're actively involved in processing what's going on. And so you really need to catch it while it's happening.
So you just mentioned that you look at it frame by frame.
Yeah.
So you kind of do both, right? So you look at frame by frame.
Right.
But then you also put the whole thing together, and,
right.
and you try to connect the data.
We do have norms that, you know, if you score very low on the overall response, it's just not going to work, and you can stop there. And we feel very confident about that. And the more extreme the result is, the more likely we're going to be correct statistically. But then we also have the local events that are occurring, and you can go back and edit that. And I did work with the editors, and they made changes based on our neural results.
Now, I mentioned earlier that we had this retreat, and what happened there was that we had a number of scientists who are specialists in this area review the study that everybody did, including yours. And then there was, I think, a really interesting discussion. I hope you share that.
It was fine.
And there was, you know, to be fair, there was some criticism, and there were a couple of issues raised that I'd love to get your response to.
Yeah.
So one was, I think, you know, you said you've been at this for 4 years now. If I think about my history and the research I've been involved in, I think it's fair to say that's a new field.
Yes, it is.
And I think there was a perception that there's still a lot of learning.
Absolutely.
That the field is progressing, that everybody is learning new things all the time, but also some criticism about maybe taking too large leaps and not that the science underlying the methodologies and the interpretations or the reports was not always, well, let's put it as mature or as
go ahead and say it.
as full and rich as the scientists would like to see. What's your view on that?
Well, absolutely, and that's a concern I share as well about the whole nascent field. And I come from a field of experimental research, and so, you know, I'm always looking for methods. What did you actually do? How did you do this? And in terms of our approach is, we're completely open in terms of the techniques that we employ. They're published in traditional journals, and they're peer reviewed. There's a really large field of cognitive neuroscience. The customers that I sold to in my previous life, that I still adhere to those methods, and so that's also why I'm not throwing things out with the bathwater here. There's this huge, field of market research that we can't ignore. So we're really a small subset of that, is the way I see it. And it's an additional tool. And it can only be done in the context of many other results. We do not claim that our results stand by themselves.
And that would have been the second part of my question, which really is, what is your advice to, companies who want to employ your work? Do you recommend to them to ignore everything else and just rely entirely on you? But I think your answer is it should be seen as part of the mix.
Absolutely. And it's rare that we do a study with just the neural by itself. And if we do that, it's usually in the context of another group that is also doing traditional market research methods.
Okay.
In fact, I can't think of a single study that we've done that hasn't been like that.
And I think that was very much the recommendation of the scientists, who commented on that. And I do recall you very much made that clear at the retreat that you're really embracing this idea. So without putting words in your mouth, would it be correct to say that your advice to users is that the kind of work that you do provides additional input, additional knowledge, helps you generate more hypotheses, and maybe help also pinpoint certain elements?
Right.
Is that a good way of putting it?
Yeah, actually, let me give a concrete example.
Please.
Let's say that we see something happening in a commercial and it goes negative. Okay. And we say, okay, there's a problem here, or was that the intent? Well, that would elicit some more behavioral testing and focus in on that. So it would guide your behavioral analysis or questions, and we do that. We go back and say, well, let's work on this and let's ask some more questions about this. So it's a give and take, and that's what we see it as.
In a way, I would say that's what research should always be, right?
That's right.
You should be very much involved with the client, really know the issues that are important to them, and work with them together. Do you find that some people that you work with still sort of regard you as sort of like separate from the other research, or do they all sort of welcome the integration and you working together with
yeah,
other
there's definitely a pushback, and that is primarily due to the complexity that is coming in.
Right.
You have somebody saying, talking about a specific brain structure, and it's just going right over their knowledge base, and so that runs the risk of sounding like an expert when it really is not that important about what area of the brain is involved and so on. It's really what is the question that you're asking and answering that question empirically for them. And that's what guides me, is I look at it as from a scientific standpoint. Sometimes I don't use neurophysiology.
Interesting.
Yeah, if it's just a pure behavioral study, we do a pure behavioral study. And so if they're asking something about, is this logo better than that logo, and it's really only about color or something like that, maybe it's not useful to do neurophysiology.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for spending this time with us. I think that we were able to cover really a number of very interesting areas, namely what are the methods, and most importantly, how to use them in the field of marketing to really make them work well together with the other methods that we have. Thanks again.